Welcome to Deep Dive, a sort of personal project that I felt I had to share. I have more than 30 books in queue and probably another 30 topics that I want to learn more about. And sometimes I want to hear a summary before I invest a couple of days of deep dive. This podcast is a result of that need. With the help of some Google apps and tools, what you have here is a podcast format that is surprisingly entertaining, even if it's a bit comprehensive. For this episode, we dive into Aleister Crowley. The source for this deep dive is the book Aleister Crowley, Magick, Rock and Roll, and the Wickedest Man in the World by Gary Lachman.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into the fascinating and, let's be honest, often perplexing world of Aleister Crowley.
That figure famously dubbed the wickedest man in the world.
Exactly. A life and set of ideas that still spark so much debate.
And we've got some really compelling source material to help us navigate this very complex individual.
Absolutely. You, our listener, shared an excerpt from Gary Lachman's book, Aleister Crowley, Magick, Rock and Roll, and the Wickedest Man in the World.
Yeah, and this excerpt, it really digs into Crowley's initial steps into the occult.
Right. His deep involvement with various magical societies, some truly pivotal and often quite bizarre moments in his life.
And maybe surprisingly, his persistent influence on culture.
So our mission today really is to get past the headlines, the sensational stuff.
Yeah, try to understand the core of his story.
We want to distill the key insights from this material, offer you a clearer picture of Crowley's significance.
And maybe highlight some of the more unexpected turns, without getting totally bogged down in overly complex details.
We're looking for those aha moments, those points where things maybe click into place.
Exactly, helping you see that bigger picture.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our author, Gary Lachman, first bumps into the name Aleister Crowley way back in 1975.
He was pretty young, 19, playing music in New York City.
Yeah, in a rock band, living in a loft down on the Bowery, basically right next door to CBGB. You can just picture that scene, can't you?
Oh, definitely. And the setting he describes, it's quite evocative. Lachman talks about this kitschy interest in the occult.
Right, this stuff that kind of permeated his band's world, pentagrams, voodoo trinkets, skulls.
The usual visual shorthand for the mysterious, the forbidden. Their loft sounds like this melting pot of rock aesthetics and these darker symbols.
What do you think drew them to that stuff? Was it just image?
Well, it feels a bit performative, maybe, part of the rock and roll thing. But perhaps there was also some genuine curiosity there, too.
Like reaching for something beyond the everyday, especially in that kind of creative scene.
Yeah. And amidst all this, velvet underground posters, eerie nun statues, as he puts it.
He finds Crowley's magic in theory and practice.
Right. And he's upfront, says it wasn't an easy read, even looking back.
But certain things just grabbed him, didn't they?
Yeah, that initial pull is interesting. The book itself, even if you didn't grasp the dense text, had these striking images.
Crowley in his robes, doing rituals, Isis, Osiris.
Lachman mentions a peculiar attraction to those visuals. It makes you wonder, what power those archetypal images held for a young musician exploring alternative ideas.
Definitely. And then there was the curriculum of the AA tacked onto the back of the book.
Yes, the AA, Crowley's own magical order.
That general reading list specifically really sparked something in Lachman.
He already knew a bit about esoteric texts, apparently.
But the idea of a structured reading course in Magick, with Crowley's special K, that promised a real pathway. That clicked.
That desire for structure in esoteric study, that's key, isn't it? Suggests someone looking for more than just dabbling.
They wanted a framework.
Exactly. And the list itself, it's fascinating. Past incarnations, invocations, meditation, developing will, imagination.
Higher consciousness, breath control, tarot, Kabbalah.
Even the spelling of Kabbalah with a Q? It was deliberate, part of distinguishing the Western esoteric tradition.
What do you make of that kind of deliberate archaism? Does it just add mystique?
I think it does. It adds to that sense of something ancient, hidden, like you're unlocking a secret code.
And the mystery deepened when Lachman actually visited Samuel Weiser's bookstore in Greenwich Village.
Oh, Weiser's. That place sounds like a real hub, a nexus point for occult enthusiasts back then.
A physical spot where people could connect, browse, learn.
Absolutely. And Lachman points out the clientele included figures like David Bowie, Kenneth Anger, Jimmy Page.
Right. That story about Page wiring, what, $1,700 for a rare Crowley manuscript?
Yeah, quite a sum back then. It really shows the level of fascination Crowley already had in certain artistic circles.
Why do you think artists like that were so drawn to him? His rebelliousness?
Maybe that boundary-breaking spirit might have resonated with their own creative drives. Or perhaps just the allure of the forbidden, tapping into something powerful, unconventional.
Makes sense. And it was at Weiser's that Lachman saw a notice for a Crowley group.
Answered it almost on a whim, it sounds like.
And the response was pretty quick, wasn't it?
Yeah, surprisingly fast. Just a few days after contacting them, he gets asked if he's ready to take the probationer's oath for the AA.
And get initiated into the Ordo Templi Orientis.
Right, that older magical society Crowley eventually took over, the one known for incorporating sexual mysticism.
So this sudden invitation into not one but two magical orders must have been a bit much.
Overwhelming, yeah. But he said yes.
He committed to obtaining the knowledge and conversation of my holy guardian angel.
Which he understood as the core aim of Crowley's system, the Great Work.
And the holy guardian angel. In Crowley's system, it's not necessarily some being up in the clouds, is it?
No, it's more like your higher self, your true potential, the key to your real purpose.
So this was a huge decision for Lachman.
Absolutely pivotal. After years of just reading about Magick and Crowley, he takes this leap into actual practice.
Getting a robe, starting rituals.
It marks a serious shift from theory to lived experience.
Okay, let's shift focus now to Crowley himself. Edward Alexander Crowley, born in Leamington Spa.
And right away, he's making these boastful comparisons, like his birthplace to Shakespeare's, shows a certain grandiosity early on.
That's a telling detail, isn't it? Needing to connect himself to these huge cultural figures, even if the connection is a bit flimsy.
He even gets Shakespeare's birth year wrong.
Yeah.
Adds 14 years. It's less about facts, more about building his own narrative of importance.
And later he came to believe he'd actually achieved a kind of godhood.
In 1921, reaching the grade of Ipsissimus, the absolute top rank in his system, signifying the complete realization of the self as divine.
Wow. And he claimed aristocratic roots, too.
Right, always reinforcing that desire for elevated status. But the source material points to a big shift after his mother died.
He wasn't always like this.
Apparently not. Young Alec, a name he hated, by the way, was considered pretty well behaved. But after his mother passed, he got deeply fascinated with the Bible's book of Revelations.
Identifying with the rebels, the villain.
Exactly. The dragon, the false prophet, the beast, the scarlet woman. This early fascination with figures who defy conventional morality. It's called antinomianism.
A rejection of established laws and norms.
And it really foreshadows his later philosophy, doesn't it?
He also developed a taste for, darker stuff. Descriptions of torture, suffering.
Yeah, he admitted to what he called congenital masochism, a fantasy of desiring to be hurt. Later in life, he seemed to actively seek out situations where he felt mistreated by women.
That's just disturbing.
It's a troubling aspect of his psyche. And while he acknowledges the masochism, there's a sadistic streak, too.
Fantasies about the Indian sepoy mutiny. Admiring Nana Sahib's cruelty.
Yes, and even imagining himself torturing prisoners. His cousin apparently shared this interest, suggesting a shared fascination with violence early on.
How might those early fantasies have shaped his later views on, say, power and control?
It definitely raises questions, doesn't it, about the roots of his more controversial actions later. These aristocratic tendencies seem to get stronger after the family moved to Red Hill.
Playing cruel games with his cousin.
It paints a pretty unsettling picture of his formative years.
Okay, let's pivot back to that central quest in his early magic. The knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel.
He saw this as the absolute peak, the great work. Everything else kind of hinged on it.
And the ritual for it, the Abramelin operation, it was quite different from typical magic, wasn't it?
Yes, it really stands out. It wasn't just about chanting and using tools. It demanded this long preparation period.
6 months.
6 months of trying to live a pure and holy life, intense focus, prayer, invocation, more like Eastern meditation, aimed at inner change.
Israel Regardi, who knew Crowley later, emphasized that focus came before the ritual tools.
Exactly, increasing concentration and spiritual fervor first.
So Crowley needed a secluded spot for this. August 1899. He leaves his London flat. Why?
Couple of possibilities. Lachman suggests maybe police observation, suspicion of homosexual activity, which was illegal then.
Or maybe just saving rent money.
Could be. Or perhaps, as Lachman thinks, he just needed more isolation, a more charged environment for what he was attempting. Maybe he felt less secure without his magical partner at the time.
Now, before he fully cooked up his own system, he got tangled up with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
A major magical society back then, though his time there ended messily.
Right. He shows up to meet the leader, MacGregor Mathers, in full Highland gear.
Yeah, calling himself the Count of Glenstray. Despite the flamboyance and people like Yeats rejecting him initially, Mathers probably saw something in him. Raw potential, maybe.
What do you think Mathers saw?
Maybe a strong will. An intensity Mathers thought he could use. But Mathers himself is having major problems within the Golden Dawn.
Financial issues.
Big time. Lost his main benefactor, Annie Horniman. Plus, his long-distance dictatorship wasn't going over well with the London members.
People were getting fed up.
Very. Baker, a key member, even told Crowley he was tired of Mathers. Florence Farr, Mathers' rep in London, wanted to just dissolve the temple.
But Mathers needed new recruits for the Inner Circle, the Second Order.
And fate, or maybe just timing, presented Crowley.
So Crowley takes these oaths of obedience and secrecy directly from Mathers.
Which sets the stage for the completely bonkers Battle of Blythe Road.
April 1900, this sounds wild.
It's almost comic opera. Sorrow Semper Fidelis, ironically means always faithful, helps Crowley seize the replica vault of Christian Rosenkreuz.
A key symbolic chamber at their HQ. Crowley even hired a bouncer. Seriously.
Seems his magic needed a bit of muscle. He told the caretaker, Miss Cracknell, they were acting for Mathers, which prompted her to wire another senior member, Hunter.
Hunter shows up, finds Crowley's, changed the locks.
And cheekily added his own name to the second order roll call. Lachman calls it adolescent, which feels about right.
While they're arguing, Florence Farr brings a policeman.
Yep, demands Crowley leave. 2 days later, Yates and Hunter are arguing with the landlord, and Crowley shows up again.
In full Highland costume. Mask, dagger, the works.
With Elaine Simpson, the bouncer finally arrives late, says he couldn't find the place.
This is chaos. Yeats gets the police again.
Yes. And Yeats, acting for the London group, basically kicks Mathers and Elaine out of the order. Crowley wasn't technically second order yet.
Crowley takes them to court but loses and has to pay costs.
Right. And that was pretty much the end of the Golden Dawn as it was, a really messy end.
Yet Crowley, typical Crowley, declared it a success. What was successful about that mess?
Hard to say for sure. Maybe he saw it as shaking things up, rebelling against what he saw as stagnant leadership, clearing the path for his own thing, perhaps.
But after all that drama, he hits a spiritual crisis.
Surprisingly, yeah. Despite his victory, he felt deeply unhappy in 1900. Realized he wanted something more profound. Sent out a magical distress signal, he called it.
And got a letter back from George Cecil Jones.
Which apparently offered some kind of answer, though the details are vague. This restlessness then pushes him into mountain climbing with Oscar Eckenstein in early 1901.
That meeting with Eckenstein sounds crucial.
Absolutely pivotal. Eckenstein, a seasoned climber, thought Crowley's magic was total nonsense.
And Crowley actually listened. He was usually so sure of himself.
Uncharacteristically sheepish about it, apparently. He confessed his confusion to Eckenstein.
And Eckenstein diagnosed the problem
as an undisciplined mind, inability to control his thoughts. He offered Crowley rigorous training in concentration.
And Crowley took an oath to master his mind.
Humbled, yeah. Interestingly, Eckenstein's techniques, visualizing complex objects, were quite similar to Golden Dawn practices like Tatwa visualization.
So both Alan Bennett, his earlier mentor, and the skeptic Eckenstein stressed mental discipline.
It really underlines a core principle, doesn't it? Focusing the mind, directing attention. It's seen as vital for any real progress, magical or otherwise.
This period of introspection leads to philosophical work. Bereshith.
Subtitled An Essay in Ontology. His first real stab at the metaphysics of magic.
Bereshith, like the first word of Genesis.
Exactly. Hugely important in Kabbalah. Crowley claimed he had rediscovered some lost secret within it. He was influenced by Buddhism, emptiness, but rejected Buddha's silence on origins.
Asserting the absoluteness of the Kabbalistic zero. What's that?
Pure, unmanifest potentiality. He used arcane math to argue for this idea of a positive nothingness, a fertile void.
The source of the universe. His analogy about existence being like toasted cheese is memorable.
It's a wonderfully weird image, isn't it? Using something so mundane for such a big abstract idea. His notion that there is not and could not be any cause for existence.
It even echoes some modern physics, like Hawking's spontaneous creation.
There are some surprising parallels, yeah.
He also claimed a sheik taught him Arabic Kabbalah and conjuring tricks around this time.
These kinds of exotic stories pop up a lot in his self-mythologizing. Eating scorpions, licking hot blades adds to the mystique, but probably not central to his actual system.
Okay, then we hit the really huge event, March 16th, 1904. Cairo. His wife Rose.
Warda the Seer, he called her. This is the absolute foundation of Thelema. Rose starts getting messages.
From something calling itself Aiwas.
A discarnate entity, apparently. This leads to the 3-day dictation of the Book of the Law. Short text, hugely influential.
And its core message,
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, became the absolute cornerstone of his philosophy.
it's striking how similar this receiving experience is to others, like Yeats' A Vision or Jung's 7 Sermons.
The parallels are really interesting. Highly creative, intelligent people claiming contact with sources beyond their conscious minds.
Yeats through his wife's automatic writing, Jung in a waking dream.
And the style, that kind of bombastic, quasi-biblical language in the Book of the Law, the 7 Sermons, probably reflects how steep they were in the Bible.
But Jung was much more cautious about his Red Book, kept it private mostly. Crowley went public immediately.
Yeah, that's a key difference. Maybe Crowley's inherent grandiosity, his desire to be a prophet, made him embrace it fully. While Jung, the psychologist, needed more personal integration, felt more ambivalent.
What did Crowley think he heard? The source mentions possibilities, gossipy spirits.
Or Julian James's bicameral mind theory, that ancient people heard their own internal monologue as external gods.
A psychological explanation. Maybe the right hemisphere speaking.
It's a fascinating lens. Suggests it might have been Crowley's own subconscious projecting itself, or, maybe just auditory hallucinations. Can't rule that out.
The Book of the Law also introduces his idea of historical ages, right? Isis, Osiris, Horus.
Yeah, a tripartite system. Isis, matriarchal, nature-focused. Osiris brought awareness of death, sacrifice, resurrection, religions.
And now the Age of Horus.
Dawning then, according to Crowley. An age of self-realization, realizing our own divinity. Thelema, will, as the guiding principle. An age of light, life, liberty, love.
But with a catch. Kind of elitist.
A bit. The idea that only those who embraced Thelema would really thrive in this new eon.
And his Equinox of the Gods, starting in 1904. It wasn't exactly peace and love like the Age of Aquarius idea.
Oh, quite the opposite. Crowley's new age was turbulent. Destruction, chaos, force and fire, war, Horus as a god of war and of vengeance.
A much harsher vision than typical New Age stuff.
Definitely. The source draws an interesting parallel here to Hermann Hesse's concept of the Russian man.
Someone who embraces amorality. Good and bad blur. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
Exactly. That radical rejection of conventional morality, seeing laws and beliefs as just constructs, it resonates with Crowley's transgressions.
But Hess saw the danger in that.
Crucially, yes. Hess recognized the potential for chaos in that kind of total liberation from ethics, a caution Crowley often seemed to overlook.
Okay, shifting to his students and collaborators, George Montague, Earl of Tankerville, his first student.
And conveniently, Crowley ended up on the Earl's payroll.
The Earl was having money troubles.
Yeah, dwindling fortune, needed to earn a living. Crowley's assessment of him wasn't exactly flattering, lacking will, easily led. Suggests a bit of an opportunistic dynamic there.
Then there was Victor Newburgh, young poet from Cambridge. Their relationship sounds intense.
Very complex. Newburgh apparently had masochistic tendencies, needed a master figure. That clearly appealed to Crowley.
Guru-chela relationship turned sexual.
Quickly, yes. Newburgh came from a difficult background, lots of insecurities, seemed to find a strange kind of purpose in Crowley's orbit.
Let's look at Crowley's own ideas about genius and magic. He chased scientific illuminism, genius on demand.
He saw genius as the only real miracle. Believed the key was quieting the conscious mind, achieving deep concentration, usually needing solitude.
He got that from Eckenstein and Bennett.
Credited them both. He even came to feel that once you mastered the mind, the elaborate rituals, the paraphernalia, they weren't strictly necessary.
And his thoughts on magic in his confessions are interesting. It happens below consciousness.
Yeah, like a perfect tennis serve or golf swing done without conscious thought. He quotes Gustav Meyrink, "Magic is doing without knowing."
Gene Gebser linked that magical consciousness to Jung's synchronicities, like Crowley-induced coincidences without knowing how.
That's the idea. Crowley himself seemed to know the ritual elements weren't necessarily objectively true for magic to work.
But he kept using them.
Yeah. He thought success depended on awakening the creative genius. His term for the unconscious. You had to throw yourself into it.
So a pragmatic approach. Ritual as a tool for the unconscious.
Pretty much. Which brings us to 1910, meeting Theodore Rius, head of the OTO.
Ordo Templi Orientis again. This leads to the sexual magic stuff, right?
Big time. Rius initiated him into the Yeti degree, introduced ideas about sexual fluids and alchemy, even sodomy in that context.
Then quickly up to the IX degrees with Layla Waddell.
By June, yeah. Crowley later added an XI degree grade for homosexual workings, fitting his own practices into the system.
And Rius eventually made him head of the OTO in Britain, gave him fancy titles.
Supreme and Holy King of Ireland, Iona, and all the Britons. Crowley added the title Baphomet himself.
So the OTO becomes his main outlet, his British lodge, Mysteria Mystica Maxima.
Right. Early recruit Vittoria Kremers accused him of embezzlement, though maybe paranoia on his part.
She knew Blavatsky, claimed to know Jack the Ripper's identity.
Yeah, fascinating character. Prompted Crowley to joke Blavatsky was the Ripper. Kremer's take on Crowley was blunt. It was sex that rotted him. Sex, sex, sex.
Gosh. His life certainly had controversial actions. Jean Foster's suicide, he took credit.
Disturbingly, yes. Claimed in Magic in Theory and Practice, he slew her with an astral T. Shows a real callousness, a need to claim magical power even in tragedy.
And the Paris, working with Newberg. Visions of ritual murder.
Yeah, really dark stuff. Unleashing forces, and then this idea of the ultimate act being the ritual rape, murder, or dismemberment of a virgin.
But even Crowley supposedly drew the line there.
Reportedly, yes. He flirted with the idea of human sacrifice in his writings, but maybe even he had some boundary. Though it's a pretty horrifying concept to even entertain.
Then October 1914, World War I starts. He heads to New York. On the Lusitania, no less.
Believed America was ripe for his new eon. Thought the new world was the place to be.
But New York wasn't great for him, was it? Arrived broke.
Facing real poverty in middle age, yeah. And he really disliked the city.
But still managed intense relationships. Jane Foster, Helen, hoping for a magical son with Jane.
His New York romances were complex, often tumultuous.
Yeah.
Idealized Jane, but still saw others. That focus on a magical son shows his continued belief in sex magic's power.
The dynamic with Jane sounds tricky. Her aversion to the physical side.
Yeah, that caused conflict. And meanwhile, he's seeing the snake and doing that weird serpent's kiss thing, biting lovers with his pointy teeth. Nancy Cunard claims she got blood poisoning. The snake was apparently aroused by it, leading to some epic orgy and a vision for Crowley.
Wow. And Ratan Devi, Kumaraswamy's wife. More drama there.
Tried to use magic to make her a singing star, desperately wanted his magical child with her.
Kumaraswamy almost divorced her, then changed his mind.
After she got successful, yeah. Crowley didn't care if she stayed, just wanted the kid. But she miscarried.
And his reaction?
Nonchalant, despite claiming he cared. Then accused her of killing the baby when she wanted him back. Really cruel. His attempts at a magical child kept failing.
Then, 1918, Leah Herzig enters the picture. Their first meeting was odd.
Unceremonious kiss while her sister was talking to him, apparently. Later, he asked to paint her as a dead soul.
Macabre. Then he inaugurates her as the Scarlet Woman. Ritual in his studio.
Magic circle, banishing ritual, assumedly IX degree working. Painted the mark of the beast between her breasts. She was apparently often naked in his studio.
And despite not being a hit in the U.S., considered a traitor even, he takes Leah back to England with him.
Leaving America behind, but with his new key partner and muse.
Back in England, though, things are a mess. Fortune gone.
Yep. Affairs in Scotland confused, money gone, Newberg avoiding him, reunion with George Cecil Jones disappointing, health failing too.
Bronchitis, asthma. Gets a heroin prescription. Start of a lifelong addiction.
Reduced to staying in cheap hotels? A real low point.
Which sets the stage for the Abbey of Thelema. Cefalù, Sicily, 1920.
Probably his most notorious venture, became a magnet for followers, but also immediate scandal.
Early resident Russell, Frater Genesti, former Navy guy, didn't go well.
Found Crowley coarse, anti-authoritarian personally, was repulsed by Crowley trying to seduce him by dressing as a New Orleans whore.
Seriously?
Apparently. They argued Russell left, started his own group.
Issues with Frank Maitland, too. Crowley tried to drown him.
Reportedly. Highlights Crowley's erratic, maybe violent side. And those cakes of light ceremonies. Disturbing details.
Baptizing and beheading a cock, blood in the cakes.
Yes. And the host in his mass supposedly made of excrement. Even followers like Mary Butts found that unacceptable.
A goat's turd on a plate, she said.
And a goat sacrifice, intended for a sex ritual, goat wasn't cooperating, so they sacrificed it instead. Really put Mary Butts off.
No kidding. Then scandal hits big time. Diary of a Drug Fiend, 1922. Attacked by the press.
Viciously. The Sunday Express called it a book for burning. Caused an outcry. Unlike Joyce or Huxley, the controversy didn't really boost his sales long term.
The Sunday Express went all out, helped by Mary Butts.
Oh yeah. She hit back after feeling slighted by the book. Accusations of profligacy and vice, bestial orgies, all sorts of lurid stuff.
Betty Bickers revealed unpaid debts, supported a false charge of theft.
Made him look even worse. Friends urged him to sue, but he couldn't afford it. Ironically, the book did sell out quickly from all the fuss.
Then Betty May's account in 1923. More sinister revelations. Raoul Loveday's death.
Yeah, blamed on unsanitary conditions. Allegations saw depraved rights. Crowley drug saturated.
Right.
It created a massive public backlash.
And all this negative press leads to
Mussolini's government kicking him out of Italy in 1923. End of the Abbey experiment.
After Italy, he turned back to poetry. To Man, aimed at Annie Besant.
Trying to stop her proclaiming Krishnamurti as world teacher. Mostly, though, he was writing begging letters. Priorities skewed too, using money for a jewel for a new flame, while Leah and his child starved.
Still doing magic, though. Often with Dorothy Olson, Leah becoming distant.
A relationship clearly fractured. His later years seem a mix of magic, desperate finances, and broken connections.
But he did publish Magick in Theory and Practice in 1929, a major work.
Intended as his big synthesis. Western and Eastern occultism under Thelema. But it's dense, full of his obsessions, obscure humor. Not for everyone.
Tried to modernize magic, anchor it in the psyche.
Yes, but still full of his sardonic wit. And that bombshell footnote about bloody sacrifice, hinting it meant his own sperm.
1930, he's in Lisbon with Hani Yeager, the Scarlet Teenager, corresponds with Fernando Pessoa.
Another turbulent relationship. Hani had unusual desires, became unstable, bolted. Crowley then faked her suicide with Pessoa's help.
At the Bocadou Inferno?
Bizarre plan. It failed. Hani went off to Germany. Just another strange episode.
Then the Thoth Tarot Project with Frida Harris, 1937 to 43.
7 years. Harris provided the money. It's considered the Thelemic tarot deck, full of his ideas, reversing card orders for the new eon.
He thought the secret chiefs approved.
Believed it completely. That hidden masters sanctioned his changes.
Final years. Living in Richmond. Met Montague Summers.
Who considered Crowley one of the few original and really interesting men of our age. Lived with a black woman then. Sex life winding down.
Moved to Netherwood Guest House in 45. Bohemian Place.
Guests like C.E.M. Joad, Jacob Bernowski. Crowley still eccentric. Dramatic telegrams, sun worship, huge correspondence, scaring the housekeeper using all the hot water.
Showing up at a kid's party in a turban.
Classic Crowley. Still getting funds from American followers.
Corresponded with Dion Fortune in 42. There are claims she visited him.
Kenneth Grant claimed it, but it's not in Crowley's diaries. And this idea of an arrangement before her death, acknowledging his authority, mostly just Crowley's account, no real proof.
His son Ataturk visited. Crowley wrote him a weird letter.
Advising against having more than 2 stepfathers. Ataturk's own life was pretty checkered.
John Simons visited too, his future biographer. And then Crowley died, December 1st, 1947.
Myocardial degeneration. Conflicting accounts of his last words, naturally.
I am perplexed. Sometimes I hate myself. Someone stole his watch.
Adds to the legend. Pat Doherty, who was there, said it was peaceful, no contrition, just a gust of wind and thunder. Very dramatic ending, fittingly.
After his death, Kamel wrote a biography, but Simons the Great Beast really put him back on the map.
Despite inaccuracies, yeah. More readable, more sensational, made him infamous again. Libraries refusing to stock it shows the anxiety he still caused.
His influence spread, though. Filmmakers like Kenneth Anger, Jodorowsky.
Anger's work is soaked in Thelema. Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain, definitely influenced. And literature, too, in surprising places.
M.R. James, Dion Fortune, Colin Wilson, Anthony Powell, Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, Jake Arnott.
He pops up culturally. But maybe the biggest impact was rock and roll.
You really think so? More than literature or film?
Arguably, yeah. The Beatles' connection via Indica Bookshop, Timothy Leary. Lennon using Turn Off Your Mind in Tomorrow Never Knows.
Which came from Leary's take on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but the vibe.
And The Doors. Named from Huxley via Blake, but that bust of Crowley on the album cover.
Yeah.
Morrison's whole persona, the lyrics.
Yeah.
Very Crowleyan. That antinomian thing.
Then that paved the way for occult rock, Black Sabbath, Kiss.
It seems likely. Seth's first song, inspired by Dennis Wheatley, using the devil's tritone, NIB, supposedly from Lucifer's viewpoint.
And Ozzy's solo song, Mr. Crowley, can't get much more direct than that.
Cements that link between Crowley's image and that whole genre.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. Crowley's extraordinary, often bizarre life.
From occult beginnings, through magical societies, controversial practices.
And then that surprisingly persistent cultural impact, especially in music. His personal journey, his philosophy of Thelema, it all intertwine.
Leaving this legacy that's still fascinating, still provocative, and still frequently misunderstood.
Which leaves us with maybe a final unsettling thought for you, the listener.
Considering Crowley's deep complexity, his contradictions, and that undeniable influence, what does his story really tell us?
About our enduring fascination with the esoteric, the blurry lines between rebellion, spirituality, and, well, infamy.
Was his wickedness just him challenging norms, or something darker, more fundamental in us? Something maybe to ponder as you continue your own explorations beyond this dive.